In fact, as I was coming up here, I was looking at the fog, and it also reminded me very much of the smoke in 2018 that we remember filled every part of our skies from east to west. We're here today, firefighters, legislators, environmentalists, and public health advocates, because Washington State has a wildfire crisis. This crisis endangers all of us, from the east to the west, from our rural to our urban parts of our state. And as the leader of our wildfire fighting force in Washington, I know that if we fail to act now, we are truly threatening the future of Washington State, our communities, our economy, our environment, and our firefighters. Destruction will continue to escalate. We know that, we've seen that. We've seen the destruction up close. We have lived it. In 2015, more than 1.1 million acres burned in Washington State. Homes were destroyed, and tragically, we lost firefighters' lives. In 2018, we had the worst number of wildfires in Washington State's history. And we remember very well the smoke that choked our skies from Spokane to Seattle, giving us the worst air quality in the world at times that summer. This year, more than 1,100 fires burned, and we continued to see the context of 40% of those wildfires west of the Cascades, where we were fighting fires in every corner of the state. We know what the future looks like if we continue to operate the way we have. All we have to do is look to our neighbor to the south in California, where raging fires flamed by violent winds, constant evacuations, blackouts, homes threatened, firefighters threatened. We all know the name Paradise, a town that literally burned off the face of the earth. And here in Washington, we face the same threats as Paradise, California. According to a study this year, 3 communities in Washington State have worse risks of catastrophic fires and the conditions that Paradise had. Roslyn in Kittitas County, Cliffdale in Yakima County, and Twin Lakes near Lake Wenatchee. This is not a hypothetical or an abstract risk. This is a very, very real risk for Washington State. Wildfire poses a clear and present danger to health of Washington's people, our environment, our economy, and our firefighters. In the face of this challenge, it is my responsibility, it is our responsibility to come together with a great purpose and enthusiasm to say we will not let that be our fate. We will step up to this challenge, and we will make sure that we reduce the threat of wildfires and we turn back the trajectory of our forests. Now, our firefighters, our scientists have all created the blueprint to make sure that that future is not ours, that our future is reclaiming our skies and our air, preventing our forests from burning, protecting our communities and our firefighters. That blueprint was put together, our 10-year wildfire strategic plan and our 20-year forest health plan. But strategic plans are only as good as the funding comes forward to implement them. Otherwise, they are simply piles of paper on a shelf. Today, we are rolling out legislation that will fully fund these strategies and make immediate, tangible investments in wildfire protection, reducing our forest health crisis, and ensuring we're protecting the people of Washington State. This bill is simple. It's common sense proposal to reduce the wildfire damage and cost. It will create a new, first of its kind, dedicated account that will invest $63 million each year in proven prevention and firefighting strategies. In year 1, this will put boots and resources immediately on the ground. 42 new full-time firefighters, 15 fire engine leaders and fire trucks, a new state-of-the-art helicopter to supplement our fleet of Vietnam-era Hueys. New training experts throughout the state to train volunteer firefighters, so no one of our firefighters are going and putting themselves on the line without the critical training they deserve. $15 million to protect fire-prone communities in the wildland-urban interface. $7.5 million to help property owners and small forest landowners secure and protect their property. It will also make record investments in forest health. $26 million to implement and accelerate the treatment of 1.25 million acres of forests, restoring the natural wildfire resistance by thinning and using prescribed fires, reforestation, planting new trees in those millions of acres that have burned over the last 5 to 6 years, so we can return our forests to Washington State. This would be the most our state has ever invested to save our forests. This is the evergreen state. It is our responsibility to make sure it stays evergreen. These are transformational investments we need, made at the scale and pace necessary to turn back our wildfire crisis. Revenue for this new dedicated account will come from a surcharge of just a few cents on home and auto insurance policies. By sharing the burden, we acknowledge that wildfire impacts all of us. We acknowledge that we are all in this together if we are going to change the trajectory we're on. We also minimize the costs to each family. For average household, the cost will be just over $1 a month. While this is a small increase in the short term, these smart, proactive investments will save all of us money in the long term. That's because the cost of reacting to severe fires year after year is immense. We spend on average every year $153 million a year. One fire alone in 2018, the Crescent Mountain Fire in Twist, cost the state $40 million to suppress. And that suppression makes up only 9% of the true cost of wildfires once we take into consideration health impacts, lost business, infrastructure, and the habitat. As I always say, we're going to pay for it regardless. The question is whether we're going to pay to react in the face of smoke and flames and threat to our property and our lives, or we're going to be proactive. When we keep fires small or prevent them entirely, we've saved tens of millions of dollars a year, both in reduced firefighting costs and in the reduced damage to our communities, our environment, and our way of life. Even better, by being proactive, we also create new economic opportunities in Washington State. Investments in forest health create family wage jobs, especially in our rural communities. I've had the privilege of touring the new cross-laminated timber facilities that have opened up in eastern Washington, in Colville and Spokane Valley. These facilities take timber that has been thinned from unhealthy forests and they turn it into sturdy, environmentally friendly building material for our towns and cities. It's creating hundreds of jobs in our rural communities. This is a win-win of dedicated funding for wildfire and forest health. We save money, we help boost our economy, and most important, we protect lives. Lives of our community members, lives of our firefighters. So I urge all of our legislators and our Washingtonians, let us listen to our firefighters and our fire chiefs who are first on the line, who put their lives on the line every single day for us. They've given us the blueprint to protect our communities from flames and smoke. It's time for us to have their backs and give them what they need to get the job done and keep Washington safe. Thank you. I'd like to introduce now Representative Joe Fitzgibbon, one of our champions in the legislature, who's been leading on ensuring the protection of our communities and our environment. Thank you, Representative Fitzgibbon, for joining us.
Thank you, Commissioner Franz, and it's a privilege to get to stand here today to talk about the progress that we need to make in order to improve the health of our forests and to improve the health of all Washingtonians. Wildfire seasons have been getting worse and worse each year as the effects of climate change exacerbates the conditions in those forests that makes them at risk of wildfire. In 2017 and 2018 in particular, the wildfires were so bad in so many parts of our state that every single Washingtonian in every part of this state was impacted by the health consequences of that smoke permeating our communities, permeating our lungs. The Washingtonians that are most harmed by that air pollution caused by wildfire smoke are our senior citizens, our children, and people with respiratory ailments. Whether you live in Twisp or in Tacoma, those impacts are felt in a very real way by people who have to be hospitalized, people who miss work days, people who keep children who have to stay home from school. So these impacts are felt by people in every part of our state, and it's appropriate that everybody in our state help to get ahead of the problem, that we're not just, as the commissioner said, reacting when a wildfire breaks out, but actually taking the proactive steps to reduce the risk of wildfires by implementing forest health treatments and by ensuring that we have that our first responders have the equipment that they need and that we have enough first responders to suppress fires that do ignite before they get out of control. As I said, climate change is exacerbating this crisis. Every year that global temperatures rise, as we see more extreme weather events, we see greater risk of wildfires breaking out. But climate change is not just a cause of wildfires. Wildfires are also contributing to climate change as millions of tons of carbon dioxide are emitted by the fires that rage out of control in many parts of our state. With this proactive approach that we're bringing forward this legislative session, we can not only improve the health of our forests and reduce the risk of them breaking out into catastrophic wildfires, we can also turn the tide on climate change by sequestering more carbon in reforested areas, in areas that have been burned in the past, by ensuring that there's new forests to grow up and sequester that carbon, as well as by reducing the risk that the standing carbon in our fire-prone forests does not ignite and does not exacerbate this crisis. We can interrupt that feedback loop. We can stop climate change from making our wildfires worse, as well as reduce the contributions that those wildfires make to climate change. This is an approach that will save us money in the long run. As Commissioner Franz said, we spend hundreds of millions of dollars each year in fighting these fires. That money will be much better spent in preventing those fires in the first place. We're still going to need to allocate resources for the suppression of fires, but every dollar we spend on prevention is going to save us many dollars in suppression costs, as well as in avoided costs to human health and to the environment, as well as to our climate. So it's a privilege to stand in support of this measure today. And with that, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Captain Dan Smith with Chief Dan Smith with North Kitsap Fire and Rescue.
Thank you, Representative and Commissioner Franz. As a member of the Washington State Fire Defense Committee, I serve as a mobilization regional coordinator for King, Pierce, Kitsap, and Mason counties. Standing with me today are several fire chiefs who are subject matter experts in the wildland fire suppression, and they will be available for comment regarding local fire service needs. Today, we are pleased to say that the Washington Fire Chiefs support the DNR funding bill that will allow us to continue the great work DNR is doing today and build upon that thorough operational response, community risk reduction, and forest health programs. Your local fire chiefs depend upon this support throughout Washington State, and we're extremely pleased to have Commissioner Franz and her team leading the way on this critical program. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Mike Stevens, the Nature Conservative.
Good morning, my name is Mike Stevens. I'm the Washington State Director for the Nature Conservancy, and for 60 years the Nature Conservancy has worked in communities around the state, ensuring that we have a future where both people and nature can thrive. We manage about 100,000 acres around the state, including over 75,000 acres of highly fire-exposed sagebrush steppe and dry forests east of the Cascade Crest. In 2017, the Jolly Mountain Fire erupted on the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest, burned onto state lands and then onto lands that the Nature Conservancy owns and manages above the communities of Ronald, Roslyn, and Cle Elum. And what we saw was communities bringing themselves together to respond to this threat, even as many members of that community, including our staff, face the prospect of evacuation and the loss of their homes. So these are very real issues for our own team and for all the people in communities around the state, particularly east of the mountains, that we work with on a daily basis. And what we know is that these communities have recognized the threat of fire for many years and have done a lot of the hard work to be ready for a future where we know the threat, the intensity, and the extent of fire is going to just keep going up. We have a long history of management that has led us to a real need to restore, through various means, over 2.7 million acres of forest around the state east of the mountains. Again, that's 30% of the forests east of the Cascade Crest. So this is a huge need, and we need to step up that work. And the people of Eastern Washington in particular, but throughout the state, have recognized that their relationship to their forests is really fundamental to their long-term prosperity and their ability to thrive as communities. There are forest collaboratives working up and down the Cascades that are figuring out how to do restoration at a pace and scale that matches the threat of fire. And it is time for the state to invest in these communities and invest in our safety and in the incredible values that are generated by these forests. 80% of Washington's drinking water is coming out of forests. We all love our forests for the habitat, the access to amazing experiences with our families, and to the many other values that these forests provide. And we need a long-term vision, which the State Department of Natural Resources has embedded in its 20-year plan. We have a vision for the state's forests, and now we need to invest in that future and invest in our ability to rebuild our relationship with the woods and to protect and supply our firefighters with what they need to keep us safe. So we are in support of this bill, and we're looking very much forward to working with our friends and partners around the state to pass it this year. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to introduce Carrie Neeson of the American Lung Association.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here with you today. I can tell you this is the coldest office that I've ever had, but also one of the coolest when I look at those cool helicopters behind us. So for the American Lung Association, it's all about our health. Climate change presents one of the greatest threats to human health. In addition to air pollution, climate-induced wildfires, crop loss, infectious diseases, and disasters from extreme weather bring and cost an extraordinarily high human and financial cost. We are all too familiar with the wildfires, as our communities are too often blanketed with smoke during our wildfire season, which are growing in length and intensity. The American Lung Association greatly appreciates this approach that looks towards prevention as a solution. The impacts of wildfire on health are well documented. The increases in wildfire frequency worsens our air quality and causes harm to our lungs and our public health. Wildfire smoke contains particle pollution as well as other toxins, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, and volatile organic compounds, which are ozone precursors and can significantly worsen our air quality, both locally, as we have seen in our state, and in areas downwind of fires, miles and miles away from the actual flames. Many of the particles in wildfire smoke are particularly small, much smaller than the diameter of a human hair. These particles easily slip through the defense systems that our respiratory system has, and they can lodge deeply in our lungs. Some of these particles are so small, they can actually be absorbed directly into our bloodstream, causing inflammation and illness. Increased exposure to particle pollution is known to cause earlier mortality and morbidity. Exposure can lead to cancer, respiratory problems such as asthma, bronchitis, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and reduced lung function. Many of us are particularly vulnerable to the health effects of wildfire. Our children whose lungs are still developing are particularly sensitive. 80% of our lung development actually occurs after we're born. So exposure to air toxins can actually prevent or delay lung development and can threaten the development of lungs into fully healthy adult lungs. Our elderly, those with chronic diseases, and those working outdoors are at increased risk. The American Lung Association applauds the work that has been done to get us to this point today. We applaud seeking solutions to prevent wildfires as we work to lessen the impacts of wildfire smoke in our state.
So thank you. I want to thank you to everybody who's come out and spoken today in support, and appreciate also to all the work of my team and being able to put this proposal together. At this time, I think we're going to take questions, and I welcome everybody to come up because I'm sure a number of you will also receive questions. So proceed. Yes.
Richard, are you worried about backlash? We were here a year ago talking about asking for more money from the legislature. They gave you a record amount. Here we are, now we're talking about a new tax. This recent election suggested folks weren't excited about taxes. Are you afraid you're going to have to sell this one?
Well, let me just be clear. I would never take this job lying down and think that I don't have to actually pitch and actually make a case for it, right? And I certainly should. First of all, the money that we asked for in the legislature this last session, early 2019, we feel fortunate we got $50 million, most we've ever had. But we were very, very clear that this is literally just funding the work we have in front of us for this biennium. If we're going to implement the Forest Health Plan, which our legislature has adopted into statute as a partnership with the Department of Natural Resources, and our Wildfire Strategic Plan, which has the support and was developed by local, state, and federal firefighting agencies, we are going to need a dedicated revenue stream so that we can make sure it doesn't just sit as plans on the shelf. And we've made that clear. Obviously, we know that the legislature has enormous amount of challenges in front of it, from transportation and homelessness and mental health and education. But we believe the case is very clear that we are already, the legislature and our public are already spending $153 million a year to react to fires, and that's only 9% of the cost. So the money we're asking for up front will help reduce the money that we're paying on the back end and actually help protect our communities, the health and the economy and the environment. And I believe it's a strong case that we can make. Yes?
This might be a question for the fire chiefs, but given the fact we just had a dry month and you were mentioning Paradise, are you and the fire chiefs more concerned that we are now more prone to see what happened in California happening up here?
I definitely would like to welcome you guys to step up and answer this, because you guys are always right on the ground. First, what I would say is, since I've been in this job over 3 years, not a year has come by where I did not feel that we could take a season off from wildfires. We've seen the wildfire seasons growing larger and longer. From this last year in 2019, we saw fires second week in March, 54 fires in 1 week, 53 west of the Cascades. It continued to pick up scale with 1,100 fires. Clearly not as bad as 2015 and 2018, but we believe we're only going to, if you look at the numbers and you look at the consistent drought and you look at the forest health crisis that we see not just in Eastern Washington but Western Washington, we will continue to see catastrophic larger wildfires, larger wildfire seasons, and what we are seeing in California.
My name is Steve.